Welcome to the second part of my lecturette here on the energy chapter. So in this section, we're going to talk about nuclear reactors, how they work, advantages and disadvantages, and what are our main renewable forms of energy. I alluded to this in the first section. There's a lot of things that our author says in this book that I do not agree with, and this is no exception. As a matter of fact, a lot of the stuff that is brought in this chapter about nuclear energy is outdated by a lot, and um, what we need to become aware of is that the new environmentalist embraces nuclear energy. Okay, the fear of nuclear energy is a thing of the past, but not if we keep on looking at it from the paradigm that continues to be propagated by many people, including this author. And again, I do not understand what the motivation behind this is. I don't know who we're trying to protect, who we're trying to enrich. It is not evident to me. It's not immediately obvious, but suffice it to say that this information is not accurate. Okay, so I'm going to be alluding to what is happening in today's world. Okay, so we start with President Dwight Eisenhower in 1953 when he had his Atoms for Peace speech in the United Nations. And essentially, it is the discussion that the United States would start using nuclear material, fission, okay, the breaking of heavy elements to provide energy and not as weapons, okay? And this energy would be clean, it would be abundant. Your author tells you that today there's about 440 reactors worldwide, about 104 in the United States. I suggest that the estimate in the United States is probably correct, but the estimate for the world I do not believe is correct. And the reason for that is because certain countries, in particular France, is undergoing a renaissance of nuclear energy. And within the last few years, they have been starting and running third and fourth generation nuclear reactors. And that technology is very advanced, incredibly advanced. And as a consequence, France has a surplus of energy right now, and they sell that to surrounding European countries, okay, with no threat of disaster. So this is again one of the first problems in the information. And here's the problem with us: half of the U.S. plants, 52, are more than 30 years old and are thus approaching the end of their expected operational life. And yeah, that makes sense. Um, we have not we we are stubborn people in the United States. We are incredibly stubborn. We given a choice, we do not want to change the way that we do things, and so consequently, we have not been embracing the state-of-the-art technology that deals with nuclear power. So, can I believe that this statement is true? That half of the nuclear power plants in the United States are about to go out of commission? Absolutely, because we have not embraced the new technology that provides smaller, quicker, less expensive nuclear power plants to run, okay? We simply have not embraced that technology. All that technology is strictly in Europe, okay? Right now, nuclear power amounts for about 8% of the United States energy supply. For certain European countries, it's very close to 100%. Okay. Now, how does a nuclear reactor work? The first thing that we need to know is that it's called nuclear fission, not to be confused with fusion, which we cannot use. Fusion is what drives the sun. We use nuclear fission. So in nuclear fission, what we have is the nucleus of a very heavy element. In this case, uranium-235, okay? Where 235 is the atomic mass of this particular isotope, okay? And what happens is that because this nucleus is unstable, every once in a while, a neutron comes out of it at a very high velocity. That neutron will run into another uranium-235 nucleus, and in doing so, the nucleus will be split, okay? So here you can see this nucleus being split into 10-131 and molybdenum-103, okay? Well, one of the things that's interesting about this is that if you're to take the mass of these two daughter nuclei and subtract it from the mass of the parent nuclei of this uranium-236, the mass would not match. We're not missing any subatomic particles. So in fact, if you add the number of particles, they're the same number before and after. And yet there's a difference in the mass. And that mass difference we have figured out is the binding energy that was holding this nucleus together. So this is where that incredible equation from Albert Einstein comes in of E equals mc squared, because that missing matter gets multiplied by the velocity of light squared, and subsequently you end up with very little matter turning into a lot of energy. And the reason for that is because the speed of light is a very large number, okay? So what happens with us, we produce heat, okay? And when this happens, as you notice, 2 additional neutrons get released. Those 2 neutrons will themselves hit 2 additional uranium-235 nuclei. They will split, leaving 2 more neutrons to come out. So then we start out with 1 neutron, then 2, then 4, then 8, then 16, then 32. So the reaction is a chain reaction. It is self-sustaining, and at the beginning at least, it's exponential. Now, we can't let it go exponential, because if you let it go exponential, you have an atomic bomb, okay? So what you have to do is you have to regulate this chain reaction so it continues to produce neutrons, but at a steady state, not an increase, okay? And what we do is we put rods in there, and those rods absorb the neutrons, and it slows down the rate of the reaction, of the atomic reaction, okay? In the old days, those rods were carbon. Now they're two metals, and I forget the names right now, but it's in your book, I know this. So we use 2 different metals for capturing these neutrons. Okay, so here's the fuel rods. Okay, so fuel rods have the uranium in them. These are the control rods right here. So if you want to slow down the reaction, you lower the control rods in. If you want to speed up the reaction, you pull up the control rods. So either slow down or speed up the fission. Now, that fission creates heat. That heat heats up water. That water comes out and goes into what's called a heat exchanger. Here it is, which heats a second loop of water. And then this water, which is really steam because of the high temperature, then enters a turbine, and that turbine powers either a generator or an alternator, okay? Now, here's where the loss in efficiency comes in. We always have losses in efficiency. This water needs to be cooled down in order to be condensed and brought back into this heat exchanger here. So in order to do that, heat needs to come out, okay? And that heat is being exchanged and going into a cooling tower. So this is what you and I see when we look at nuclear power plants. We see the cooling towers. We don't see the main nuclear reactor, okay? Let's see. Here is, so it says fuel rods containing uranium-235 are placed in water in a reactor core interspersed with neutron absorbing, those are the control rods, containing boron or cadmium, okay? When the control rods, these are control rods, when the control rods are raised, a chain reaction and nuclear fission occurs in fuel rods, creating heat. The high pressure superheated water flows to a heat exchanger, which generates steam in a separate secondary loop. That's this guy right here. The steam in turn turns a turbine, which turns an electricity generator. What is the biggest danger in one of these complex nuclear reactors? Having the cooling system fail. If the cooling system fails, either this one or the secondary, and the pumps fail, this nuclear fuel will become superheated. And in the worst case scenario, it will liquefy and it will melt through the bottom until it cools down. So this is what happened at Chernobyl, okay? So that's why people are weary about the Russians, because when they had their problem at Chernobyl, everybody started detecting radiation in the atmosphere. So the French run a very clean environment. So they were among the first to go, hey, did you guys notice any radioactivity? And Russia went, we don't know anything. And then I believe it was Germany picked it up. Hey, there's radiation coming through here. Do you guys know why? We don't know anything. And then it went through Great Britain. They did the same thing. We seem to have radiation coming through here. Is something happening over there? We don't know anything. And they kept it hush for as long as they could until they couldn't anymore. Because I'm going to tell you, you cannot keep a nuclear reactor meltdown secret for very long, okay? So those nuclear fuel rods melted, they went through the bottom, and they made what's called a elephant's foot, because it looks like an elephant's foot at the bottom. That was incredibly highly radioactive, and there's no alternative. The poor engineers had to come in there and pour concrete and lead in order to stabilize the reaction of this elephant's foot. Okay, arguably the world's most dangerous problem. So engineers would go in there at 15-minute intervals and cover this elephant's foot with again lead and concrete. And after being exposed to it for only 15 minutes, they ended up dying of radiation poisoning. So they would lose their hair, they would lose their lymphatic system, and they would end up perishing. So that's how incredibly radioactive this stuff is. So now that I've scared everybody a little bit, how can I sit here and tell you that this is no longer a problem? I mean, I just finished telling you that a reactor meltdown is arguably the worst thing that could happen. Well, the reason I can say that with a straight face is because we have incredible French engineers that are working on third and fourth generation nuclear reactors. These reactors are incredible. They are literally foolproof, okay? For instance, the nuclear fissionable fuel rods are not solid. They are liquid. Why does that matter? Because at the bottom of their small reactor, there's a cupola down here. And if the reactor reaches meltdown and these fuel rods literally melt down to the bottom of the reactor, the liquid fusionable material falls into this cupola. The cupola separates it and arrests or stops the chain reaction. So, in other words, we have made a reactor in which the worst case scenario, which is a nuclear meltdown, has no consequence. If you have a nuclear meltdown, again, the fissionable material will fall, it'll be separated, and it'll be arrested. No problem whatsoever. We have made these third and fourth generation reactors so safe, it's not even funny. Okay, and they're very small. Okay, the first generation reactors that we use in the United States are very large and they're very expensive. The ones that they use in Europe and France, they're very small, they're very powerful, and they power large cities, not necessarily states, but large cities very, very well. And it's all green. What does green mean? It means that it's not making carbon dioxide, it's not making methane, it's not making any of the green gases that we have problems with. The benefits are incredible. So the new environmentalist is embracing nuclear energy, not running away from it. And there's another thing that's going on too, and that's, you need to ask yourself, well, where's the fuel coming from? Would you believe that the fuel is coming from nuclear warheads from both Russia, predominantly Russia, and the United States? What could be better news than, hey, let's tear down the worst weapon that exists in mankind's arsenal and use the warhead to power our cities? Now that is where the concept of, let's see if I can, that's where the concept of atoms for peace of Dwight Eisenhower came from. In other words, we're going to use atoms not for war, but for energy, for peace, That was the vision, okay? And that's one of the things that's happening, is that we're using warheads to power these reactors. Um, there's a third essential point, is escaping my mind right now. It'll come to me in just a moment. Oh, yes, of course. The safe storage for the radioactive waste. Oh my gosh, what a huge problem. Well, in Europe, they have solved the problem. This is a problem for us who insist on not changing the way that we think. In Europe, they have solved the problem. Why? Because what they do in Europe is that when the pellets have been exhausted, instead of discarding them as waste, they get uh, um, they are reconcentrated and become the fuel for the next nuclear reactor. So let's recap. What just happened? The radioactive waste of one reactor becomes the fuel for the next reactor. And the waste from that reactor becomes the fuel for the next reactor. Are we ending up with less material every time? Yes. That also means that the amount of radioactive waste is becoming less and less as we use it more and more. So by the time you're done, you're ending up with practically no radioactive waste whatsoever. And then, if you're to actually look at how big these containers are for the radioactive waste, look at this. Our author is making this look ominous. I'm willing to bet, I'm surprised that there isn't a person standing here for contrast so you can see how tall these so-called um, containers of waste are. But I'm willing to bet that a person that only reaches up to here, because this picture is meant to be ominous. It's meant to be scary. Oh my God, where are we going to put all this nuclear waste? But in truth, when you finish using the pellets, the remnant waste really falls into a container about the size of a of a um, of a recycling container. And in Europe, they were storing those where? In the parking lot. And the radioactivity was close to background. In other words, almost non-existent. Okay, so all these problems that we have with nuclear power are really problems of the past that we insist on propagating, but are not real. Look at this. So in 1987, the United States Department of Energy announced plans to build the first high-level waste repository on a barren desert ridge under Yucca Mountain. Okay, you should probably know this. Nevada. Waste was to be buried deep in the ground where it was hoped that it would remain unexposed to groundwater and earthquakes for the thousands of years required for the radioactive material to decay. Thousands? Let's put this in context. Where do you think that the radioactive material came from in the first place? I'm going to tell you, it is not man-made. This radioactive material is naturally occurring. In other words, Mother Nature made it. And did Mother Nature put it multiple miles under Yucca Mountain? No. Mother Nature put it practically on the surface of the ground. Okay? So why do we have to be a thousand times more careful than Mother Nature herself? It's really insanity. Um, you do not need thousands of years for radioactive material to decay if you take the waste and you keep on refining it for subsequent use, okay? And then we're going to blame President Obama. However, President Obama cut off the funding for the project in 2009 after 20 years of research and $100 billion in exploratory drilling and development. Good for him. Okay, this little statement right here is being placed out of context by your author, so you can go, oh, that darn President Obama, he doesn't care about where we put our nuclear waste. No, what's going on is that he got tired of the United States government spending $100 billion to explore drilling for waste that doesn't need a site. Any smart man would have done this. Okay, so why is this out of context? Again, I don't know. I don't know who we are serving by scaring people away from nuclear power. Let's see, we're moving to water. So I hope you guys notice that turbines are a common motif. Nuclear power, they use turbines. Wind, they use turbines. Water, they use turbines. So they seem to be the common motif in the harnessing of these various types of energy, okay? So the invention of water turbines in the 19th century greatly increased the efficiency of electricity producing hydropower dams, okay? And again, nobody remembers the history of this. If you ask anybody who electrified the United States, who was responsible for the electrical infrastructure of the United States, if they can muster up an answer at all, they would incorrectly come up with, oh, it must have been Thomas Edison. Absolutely not. So in fact, Thomas Edison, who only dealt in direct current, was completely against alternating current, the infrastructure that we needed to use in order to pump energy to vast distances, okay? So who do we blame? Who's responsible for this? The name of the individual is Nikola Tesla, a Bulgarian gentleman, okay? He's the one that invented the 60-cycle alternator that we use to this very day. And the reason that this is significant historically is because the first power that was used for running these alternators was water. It wasn't wind, it wasn't diesel, it wasn't gasoline, it wasn't nuclear, it was water. And I'm forgetting the name of the falls that everybody used to take their honeymoon there. Niagara Falls. So Niagara Falls was harnessed using alternating current. So the first electrification of the United States came about by using water, okay? So water is important historically. By 1925, falling water generated 40% of the world's electric power. So it was very, very important back then. Since then, hydroelectric production capacity has grown about 15 times, but fossil fuel has risen much faster, okay? That's important to know. And quite frankly, now we're in a lot of trouble. So large dams are about to, like the Hoover Dam, is going to stop working very soon. And the reason for this is because due to global warming, we have had a movement in precipitation, and the rivers that provide the water to that dam have moved. Okay, if you want to see the problem that's taking place right now, look up what's happening at with the Colorado River. The Colorado River is practically non-existent right now, and that's a problem because a lot of industry and a lot of real estate depend on the Colorado River. So now that it's not there to provide water and to provide electricity, we're in a lot of trouble. Okay, and again, this is something that could have been prevented if we paid attention to global warming. But to the Chinese, so this is arguably one of the most advanced technological feats in the world. It's called the Three Gorges Dam. Okay, and it is the biggest dam in the world. It's in China. Feel free to use Google Earth to go look at it. Okay. This is I'm not gonna lie, it's an engineering marvel. It really is. It literally has a two boat elevators, which are state of the art, very incredible. There's one that works through locks like the Panama Canal, and then on the other side there's another one that works by weight displacement, and it literally lifts and lowers ships and the surrounding water holding the ship up. If that doesn't blow your mind, then there's nothing out there. Okay, that is just incredible, and it produces a lot of electricity, and so you can ask yourself, so what's the downside? Oh, the downside is monumental, monumental. When it became known worldwide that China was working on the Three Gorges Dam, gosh, that was a complete cultural outcry because the standing water behind the dam would cover so many temples and so many cities, and so many people would be displaced that they thought that the people world over, not necessarily the Chinese, which is ironic, but the people world over thought that it would be a significant cultural loss. And the Chinese were unabated, and they continued to move forward with it. Did we lose a lot of cultural heritage from the Chinese? Yeah, we did. But it's a steep price to pay, but the product is this incredible marvel of engineering. Okay, energy efficiency and conservation. I believe it was Franklin that said a penny saved is a penny earned. So from that perspective, one of the best things that we can do with energy is to conserve its expenditure, to use it wisely. Okay. So the author says energy reductions are not as visible or exciting as a power plant or a dam, but they can produce just as much available energy just by avoiding inefficient uses. Conservation can save money as well as reducing our energy footprint. And this is where the hiccup is at. Okay. People have a tendency to be myopic. In other words, they do not see the end goal in the future. Their view is right here, right in front of their nose. And that's terrible. Okay. So for instance, you know, you could ask a homeowner to improve the way that their home is insulated, especially if we contemplate that um, the cost would be subsidized in their taxes, right? And if they look at it, the cost can be thousands of dollars. Oh, that's a lot of money. Maybe I don't want to do this. But what they don't see is that if they were to do this and they only take a small hit on it because some of it gets waived in their personal income taxes, okay, what happens? You end up with a more energy efficient home. You end up using less heat and less air conditioning, and your power bill is going to be much less. And for how long? From that moment on. So every time that you invest in the infrastructure of your home to conserve energy, that investment is going to pay dividends from that point on indefinitely. And it's going to be a lot more than the amount that you spent initially. So if you can look forward and see how much money you're going to save and realize that it's many times more than what you spent, maybe you would be motivated to do this. Okay. Let's see. So examples that your author gives is high efficiency automobiles are now available. Low emission hybrid gas electric vehicles get up to 72 miles per gallon. This is true. Even though everybody complains about these vehicles, they're there and they're very useful. And I'll even go as far as to say that they go from 18% efficiency. Some of them go as high as 40 and 42% efficiency. That's fantastic. Okay, so they give about 30.3 kilometers per liter on the highway, or we can walk, bike, take public transportation. Right now in Klamath Falls, public transportation is free because of COVID-19. We just have to use a mask and they can use public transportation. And this is important, walking and biking, okay, because not only are you saving, are you reducing your energy footprint by not consuming gasoline in your car, but this is directly helpful in improving your health. Exercise is wonderful, especially in a bike, okay? Um, yeah, you can't use this year round, but even if you use it half the year, you're still going to save energy and you're going to improve your health. This is something that I believe in very strongly. I've done this in my house. Okay, when when I first moved into my house, every light bulb was a incandescent light bulb like this one. And the very first thing that I did, because back then when I moved in, we didn't have LEDs. We only had fluorescent. But fluorescent are much more energy uh, conserving than incandescent. So right away I switched from incandescent to fluorescent. You can see blue to red, blue to red, blue to red. Am I saving energy? Absolutely, by more than 100%. And now we have LED light bulbs everywhere. Okay, so now I've gone from fluorescent to LEDs, because with LEDs, almost 100% of the electricity going to the light bulb turns into light. So we're going from red to green. Look at that, red to green. So we cut it in half again. So right now, every light bulb in my house is an LED light bulb. Now, if you go buy LED light bulbs, the first thing you're going to find out, they are expensive. They're expensive. However, between the fact that they consume a lot less energy and the fact that they outlast these two by quite a bit, you're saving energy and you're saving money. So if you can afford it, LED lights are the way to go. Or at the very least, buy LED lights for the one or two rooms that you spend the most time in. Um, it's incredible how bright LED lights are. And for the light that they put out, I mean, my electric bill is practically non-existent. And I attribute that to the fact that everything that I have is an LED light. Look at this. What do you think we're looking at? This is an infrared photograph, and bright areas are high heat areas. So this home, if I saw this home, I would run away from it because there is no insulation in this home. The amount of money that you or I would have to pay in order to keep this home warm in the winter or cold in the summer would be ridiculous because all that energy would leak to the outside. This is horrible. A properly insulated home would be almost black, where we would not be able to see any of the energy dissipate. Okay, look at the window. Look at how much energy is being dissipated through the window. That's ridiculous. Okay, so this is a demonstration of what an old home looks like. Old homes look like this because they didn't care very much about insulation. Windows were single pane windows, and it cost an arm and a leg to keep the place heated. Okay, I can't read my title. What does my title say? Oh, passive housing. So passive means that it doesn't require any energy investment. In other words, there's no moving parts. So if you have something that's active, it means that something is moving in order to bring about an effect. Passive means that nothing needs to move in order to carry out the effect. Okay, so in passive housing, it says passive housing is becoming standard in some areas. It's talking about the things that we can do to prevent houses from losing energy, and these items don't move, like insulation doesn't move. Okay, so Germany has long been a leader in energy innovation and efficiency. Many regions in Germany have begun to require that new buildings conform to passive house standards. That's also happening in the United States. We are getting a lot better. We used to be a disaster. At least we're improving here. These standards are strict energy use limits, along with guidelines for building practices that reduce energy consumption to just 10% of what normal buildings use. That's incredible. In the US, incentives such as faster permitting or tax breaks to building projects that meet uh, passive standards are increasingly common. So again, can you imagine what would happen? You know, you see all these people that flip homes, and usually what they do is they go in there and they throw on uh, 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 some paint on the wall, they change some lights, they fix some holes, and they sell it for a profit. What I would like to do is, you know, if you purchase a home, make it a passive house. Improve the insulation, improve the windows on it, and do this. Bring the energy consumption to 10% of, of the normal building's use. And then go to the buyer and go, look at this. When we bought this house, this was the energy expenditure. This is how much you guys are going to be spending. Only 10%. Do you think that would be a selling point? Do you think that people realizing that they're gonna that we're gonna pay almost nothing for heating and cooling would be a selling point? I'm willing to bet that the answer is yes. So in fact, that's probably more important than the color of the paint, maybe. Okay. So here's some examples, because what's going on is that insulation deals with materials that are low density. So if you ever put insulation up, you know that insulation is typically like fiberglass. They're very, very low density materials. And you cannot interrupt the low density material with high density materials, because if you do, the heat will transfer through that high density material. So for example, you can have wood being tethered together by bolts, because the bolt is a high density substance, and now the energy that's supposed to be impeded by the wood is going to be transferred by the metallic bolt. So the construction is very important. The construction has to be almost 100% low density materials with what's called high R factors, which means that they are good insulators. Okay. So having shade trees to help cool your home, having photovoltaics to help with your energy bill. Um, Here we go. Roof, 12-inch, 30 centimeter insulation with an R factor of 36 to 48. That's really high. Somebody really wants to conserve energy there. Overhanging, uh, um, let's move on here. Weather stripping, doors, windows, vents, fixtures to prevent air leaks. Very important. This is very important. Windows, double or triple panes, will place for light. Okay. So if you have a window with a single pane, that is a that's an area of high energy loss. The act of putting just a second pane there, you have window and you have window. And in the middle, you have space, and that space is air. But air is very low density. So the very act of just putting a second pane on your windows is enough to make that window become very passive in energy conservation. And I didn't even, I learned something. I did not realize that there was such a thing as triple pane windows, but there are, and they're even better. I'm willing to bet even more expensive. So geothermal, this is fantastic. Geothermal heating and cooling. Oh my God. How can you not want that? Geothermal, that means that you're going to get heating and cooling for free. For free. You know who has a lot of geothermal? Klamath Falls. Um, See, here we go. Advanced framing, which prevents conductive heat loss. In other words, the house is tethered in such a way that no bolts or metal is used, because those would be the areas in which heat would be lost. Okay, so all these are parts of a passive home. Okay, so no thermal no thermal bridges. Wood or metal components conduct heat through walls. Wood not so much, because wood is relatively low density, but metal components, glass, they do. So metal components conduct heat through walls, roof, or foundation. So that's what we need to move away from. Roof and wall insulation should be 24 to 32 centimeters. Well-sealed windows and doors to prevent heat loss or gain. Heat exchangers to warm or cool fresh air as it is exchanged with still air leaving the building. This is code for probably heat pump. Heat pumps are very efficient. Again, very expensive. I've looked into heat pumps for my home, and even I had a hiccup. Um, oh my gosh! But if I could afford it, I would do it because in the long run, it would cost a lot less. Triple pane windows that reduce radiative heat loss or gain. Okay. Cogeneration, the production of two things at the same time. So electricity and hot water, for example. So if you generate more than one thing with the energy, the efficiency increases. Here, by producing electricity and hot water, you can go from 30 to 35 to 80 to 90% efficiency. That's beautiful. Okay, so another way of saying passive construction would be green building. Okay, um, so elements of green building uh, are evolving rapidly, and they include what? Here we go. We've heard all this. Extra insulation in walls and roof, coated windows to keep summer heat out and winter heat in, and recycled materials which save energy in production. Okay. What's the significance of this green building? It provides comfort and it saves money and it reduces your energy footprint. Um, there's a new construction method. It's not that new. I ran into it probably more than a decade ago. But what it is these styrofoam bricks that you set up. You put rebar in the middle of them, and then you stack them up like Legos. Okay, and that once you stack them up, the next day you bring in a concrete truck and you pour concrete in the middle, and that Lego block remains there. It provides the insulation for that home, and the inside structure consists of rebar and cement. That's not going anywhere. So you end up producing a home with walls that are very sturdy. Uh, they're never going to fall, and the insulation value is very, very high because of the styrofoam blocks. And putting these things together is not hard. I remember when we were doing it, we were actually having fun doing it. It was literally like putting Lego blocks together to form a house. Very, very neat. So I'm going to stop here. I hope I haven't bored you too much. I've been trying to make it interesting, and I'll see you guys in a little bit, okay? Let's see. See ya.